Dear listeners, just a quick note before we start the show. With only a week left before 2025 begins, we will kick off our year-end series starting tomorrow. In this series, we'll take a look at some of the most significant moments of 2024 across Indian politics, the judiciary, foreign affairs, and technology. Be sure to catch the first part of the series tomorrow. But for today, as we stand on the brink of the holiday season, we bring you a conversation that aired a few months ago and which was specifically curated keeping the holiday season in mind.
Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show.
This is the time of year when almost everyone in the country is in a festive mood. It's a time for people to come together and enjoy the company of friends and family. And usually, one of the highlights of these gatherings is the food. Sweet, savory, deep-fried, and well, delicious. And while all these delights are fine in moderation, we often end up indulging more than we should. And if we're being honest, isn't that what the festival season is all about? Indulging yourself in everything delicious? But how much indulgence is too much? And are there ways to make our celebrations just a bit healthier? To help us answer these questions, today on the show, we are speaking with Dr. Ritika Samaddar, the regional head of the Department of Clinical Nutrition and Dietetics at Max Healthcare. Dr. Samaddar, I wanted to begin this conversation by first asking you, how bad is binging? How bad is going off course during the festive season? And does it have any sort of lasting impact?
So yes, it does have. So when we talk about binging, we have to understand what exactly is binging and to what extent can you binge, right? So when you talk about binging is obviously you're eating something, one, more in quantity or probably one which is not as per the nutrient profile. So it's probably more of those so-called junk foods and all. So when we binge during the festivities, both the things happen. One, there is an increase in the quantity because we are obviously going out for late night parties and then there is too much of things through the day. So we're probably at home. So you're probably eating much more in quantity. But besides that, we also tend to binge on something which is called the junk foods. So that is where you really have to control because it's not just about the quantity, but it's also about the quality. So either you decrease the quantity, have smaller portion size so that it makes sense so that you're not going overboard on your calories, etc. Or probably if you're tending to eat too much, then probably you'll have to look for healthier options.
And when you say it does have a lasting impact, what do you mean by that?
So putting the mathematics straight, we know that, everything you eat is actually calories in. So first thing which will have a lasting impact is, of course, definitely post festivities, we see a lot of weight gain. And that's probably because there is increased amount of concentrated calories which are going in. And we have to understand that even if you take an extra 500 calories over a period of even a week, you'll probably put on about 1 kilo for sure. So that's one thing. The second is, of course, the kind of food which we eat during festivities is obviously extra in oil, sugar, and salt. Now remember, all the three things are extremely harmful. So people who have underlying problems of diabetes or hypertension or even cardiac issues obviously have to be very, very careful because if you overindulge in all these three things, and most of the things, if you have a mithai or probably if you're having a packet of bhujia or something, they're usually excess in not only calories, but excess in salt, sugar and oil. So you have to be very, very careful. Even for a healthy individual, if he keeps on indulging, and I think my answer to that is in India, every month there is one or the other festivities, right? So therefore, you really have to be very cautious. You cannot say Diwali is ending, so it's the last festival of the year, because I think another month and we have Christmas round the corner and then we have New Year's again. So probably it's a matter, every month there's something which we binge on. So therefore, we have to be very careful on the quantity and the quality which we are taking.
Okay, so one thing you mentioned is weight gain. Now, a lot of conversations about healthy eating often get reduced to just that. And so much of it centers around aesthetics and how we want to look. Could you make a distinction there? Because there are a lot of fad diets out there that focus on looking thin, but they might not necessarily be the healthiest option.
So ideally, when we talk about weight gain, as nutritionists, when a client or a patient comes to us, we never see the scale and just see that, how much of weight they have gained. But ideally, we do a body fat analysis to see how much of the fat percentage the person has gained, how much of the muscle the person has lost, or how much has the water he gained. So these are the important indicators for us to understand whether the person is actually healthy or not. So specifically when you are binging on these calorie dense foods, like the foods which are very high on sweets and very high on oil, what you tend to put on is you might put on 1 kilo or 2 kilo, which is very easy to lose following any of these fat diets. But what happens is you actually put on a lot of fat percentage in the body. That becomes very difficult to lose, because if you just gained a little muscle mass or probably gained a little water, it would have been very easy. But if you gain on the fat percentage, then it takes a longer time to lose, and also obviously it has health repercussions over a period of time.
Okay, now let's talk about specifics. We know that whether it is Diwali, Christmas, Eid, or New Year's, one thing common between all of them are sweets, right? And we have all sorts of them in India. And whenever you're at a party or a get together, it can even feel rude to say no to these sweets. So first, tell us, how many sweets are too many?
So again, the concept of sweet, you need to understand what quality or what is the type of sweet you're having, right? So my typical answer to that to everybody is, you have a gulab jamun, which is we consider the worst of the sweets on earth, right? Why? Because it's made with refined flour, which is maida, which is pure sugar. Then it is deep fried. So obviously there's a lot of oil. And then again, it's soaked into sugar concentrate, right? So there is not even a drop of health into that gulab jamun, which is getting into your mouth.
And what about jalebi?
Yeah. So even for that matter, jalebi would be the same, right? Because it's deep fried and then you put it into a sugar syrup. But on the contrary, there are a lot of the other sweets which are very, very healthy also. It's not because I'm a Bengali, but you have the Bengali Sandesh, which I feel is loaded with nutrients, right? It's much less in sweet, the amount of sweet which is added. It is made with chena, which is a pure protein or paneer. So I really don't mind people indulging in a piece or two pieces of a Sandesh during the festivity, enjoying the festival, having their sweets also, but at the same time, not compromising on the health.
Okay, so you mentioned some better alternatives to gulab jamun or jalebi, and that's something everyone can follow. But what about people who have diabetes, for example? What would you suggest for them?
Right. So for a diabetic, it's very important how well your sugars are controlled. So if your HbA1c is under control, that means it is below 7. Even though you've been a diabetic for a very long time, you can indulge in some amount of sweet during the festivities. The only difference being, rather than taking something which is pure sugar, like for example, we just mentioned about a gulab jamun or a jalebi, instead of that, if you probably indulge into something like a little gajar ka halwa or probably even a milk-based dessert, the sugar raise would be much low, because whenever you're taking sugar along with the protein, the rise in the sugar is much less as compared to when you're taking something which is pure sugar.
And would you recommend artificial sweeteners, things like sugar-free or stevia?
Okay, so artificial sweeteners, very, very controversial. But yes, there are these guidelines which have been given by FSSAI, international guidelines have been given that there is a minimal amount which can be taken and does not have an effect. But yes, we know that if somebody is indulging on taking these sweeteners for a very long time and on a continuous basis, one, it is addictive. And second, of course, it does have some kind of a health concerns. But as I said, during the festivities, if you're wanting to indulge into a little sweet, and if you're a diabetic and if you're being asked or advised not to take any sweet, I don't see there is a reason for not adding sweeteners into your desserts and enjoying the sweets.
And although we don't really count them as desserts, soft drinks have a lot of sugar in them, right? And those are also consumed a fair bit during the festive season.
Yeah, so liquid beverages are a big thing when we really count on binging on those so-called junk foods or extra calories and all, because people usually do not count them. They generally think about what snacks they have eaten or probably what sweets, especially the sweetened beverages. So whether it's the mocktails or whether it's the shakes, etc., which are there, even something like a cold coffee is also loaded with calories, because as sugars are added, creams are added, probably a scoop of ice cream is added. So liquid beverages are loaded with calories, and you really have to be careful, especially during the festive season if you're indulging in them.
And doctor, are there things one can do to offset the effect of sugar? For example, having desserts at the end of a meal, does that help at all?
Definitely, yes. Specifically for a diabetic, it actually depends upon how much quantity of sugar which you're taking at one time and how instantly the body is absorbing it. As you rightly said, if you take a sweet, empty stomach, obviously the body will instantly absorb it and there will be an influx of sugar into the bloodstream, and hence the sugar levels would really rise. But if you take it in combination with something, one, as you suggested, like if you take it as a part of your meal, and at the end of the meal, you're probably taking a piece of a sweet, probably it will not even reflect in your blood sugar levels. Or as we usually suggest to all the diabetics is that prior to starting your meal, if you can have a bowl of salads, or probably if you can have a a tablespoonful of seeds like chia seeds soaked in water, or even of the mixture of the seeds, your rise in the sugar would be much less as compared to if you're taking just a simple sugar.
Okay, and now during the festival season, we also indulge in what's on the opposite end of the spectrum from sweets. We also end up eating a lot of salty food. So tell us, how does salt-heavy food affect our body?
So we all, of course, I think are aware that India is the diabetes capital of the world. But we do not know that we also have the maximum number of hypertensive people in the country. And that's probably because of the large population we have. But sadly, it's the younger generation or the young adults who are getting a lot of hypertension. And probably 50 to 60% of it is, they don't even get it checked. So there's something called the hidden hypertension, which people don't even are aware of it. And probably by the time they get to know about it, probably the kidneys have got affected, or probably they've got some heart issues and all. So this is a major concern in a country like us. And the main reason for hypertension or blood pressure is just having extra salt. And where do we get from the extra salt? It is not from the food which you're eating at home. In fact, studies have shown that 80% of what you're eating outside is the cause for hypertension, and not the 20% which you eat from food. So for simple example, even if I have just 2 slices of a pizza outside, I probably meet up with my 50% of my daily's requirement of salt. Or even if I open up a packet of chips or a bhujia packet, I meet my 100% requirement of my sodium for the day by just 1 packet of bhujia. So you can really understand that when you're eating these namkeens or these packaged foods, which you usually buy it from outside, they are actually, so we're not so much concerned about the calories in the packet of chips, but we are more concerned in the sodiums and the additives which have been added, which of course have a impact on your health directly.
You mentioned the worst offender when it comes to sweets. What is the worst offender when it comes to salt?
I would say a packet of bhujiyas and the namkeens, and most of the time, it's labeled as air fried or probably baked and all. Don't go by those words, because even if it's baked or air fried, the sodium content still remains the same. So therefore, you'll have to be really careful. And that's the reason why FSSAI is coming up in a big way of making the reading of the labels very, very simple, so that as consumers, whenever you're picking up, and I want to emphasize here, because we're really talking a lot about these packaged foods and all. Not all packaged foods are bad, but as consumers, we should be very, very attentive while we're picking up things, read the labels, and there's a lot of efforts going on to simplify the reading of labels, so that as consumers, we read the amount of salt and the sugar, because everything is mentioned on the pack. It's just that we probably as consumers do not read that.
And these are the things that those eating this kind of food can keep in mind. What would you recommend to those making these sweets and snacks at home? What are the things that they can keep in mind to make the food slightly less unhealthy in that sense?
Yeah. So the same sweet which you buy from outside vis-a-vis when you're making at home, remember, it's almost 50 to 60% more healthier, right? One, because the quality of oil you're using, probably the quantity of sugar which you will add into the sweet will be much less as what is being added outside. So definitely during festivities, if you can make that effort and make the sweets at home, this is always recommended. Now talking about which are the sweets which can be more healthier when you're making it at home. So a milk-based dessert would definitely be more healthier, because remember, the moment you're adding milk, you're adding a lot of protein into your dessert. Also uses of lots of nuts and seeds. I think Diwali is a festival where there's a lot of exchanging of gifts. And I think now the trend is there of, exchanging of these healthy stuffs, like a lot of nuts come into your house, a lot of seeds are being presented. So why not use them in a healthier way by making desserts and having. So even if you're making something like a laddu with your nuts and dates and of course your seeds, I think that's a very, very healthy thing. And not only that, this can be kept over a period of time. So you don't have to overindulge and eat large portions and finish it on day one. You can keep it over a period of time and just indulge on them over a period of time.
Okay, and since we're talking about unhealthy habits, the other thing we see during this season is a lot of binge drinking, a lot of alcohol. We know, of course, that alcohol is bad for us, but the idea that a lot of people have is that 1 or 2 drinks is okay. It's not going to do that much harm. But is that true?
No, in fact, WHO has now categorically said that alcohol is one of the factors which can induce cancer. So therefore, it's not one peg or once a week or something. It actually says that you should actually stop taking alcohol. So they've been very strict about it. Yes, years before, about a decade back, we also used to say that probably having a small amount once or twice a week probably is even protective for the heart. But no, it is not. So therefore, it is something which should not be encouraged. And obviously, I know it's easier said than done that, you stop taking alcohol. But people who are heavy drinkers should obviously restrict the quantity and get it down. People who are not taking should not start it just because it's good for the heart. But alcohol is not to be recommended. And not only because of cancers and heart diseases and diabetes, but also for fatty liver. We have seen an exponential increase in our population with fatty liver. And one of the reasons for that is, of course, alcohol, because alcohol gives you simple sugars which instantly get absorbed and gets absorbed in your liver very fast. And your triglycerides go high, and that's one reason when we have fatty liver.
And what about people who are listening to this and saying, listen, I'm still going to have my drinks when I'm with my friends? What are the things that they can keep in mind?
So portion control is one of the most important things. So obviously go very slow with your alcohols. Do not take too much at one time. Second is obviously you can probably dilute it with adding more water and things so that you can probably have 2-3 glasses, but probably the concentration of the alcohol gone inside is much less. Also very, very important is to probably have some snacks with them. And we generally tell that the snacking with the alcohol should be something which is not fried and should not be a refined, because then it's like a double bomb. On one hand, you're taking these simple carbs in the form of refined carbs in the form of alcohol. And on the other, you're having oil. So that's a deadly combination. So do not do that. Instead, if you're having your alcohol, look for some healthier options of snack, probably having some salad strips like your cucumber and carrot strips, or probably having some peanuts with it, or even having some nuts with it, probably would help you to a certain extent.
Okay, so one thing you've been talking about is portion control, right? And when it comes to food, I think a lot of people end up realizing that they're too full only at the end of a meal. Because once you have a variety of options spread in front of you, you kind of want to taste everything a little bit, but all that adds up. So what advice would you give to people so that they don't end up reaching that stage?
So see, portion control, ideally nowadays when we even talk about weight loss programs or etc., we are not counting calories anymore, right? We are more focusing on the quality of the food and obviously looking into the portion control. So what I mean by this is that even if you're indulging in something wrong, so when I pick up a packet of chips, I think all of us know it's not healthy and it's going to do us harm, but we still end up eating. So the only way I can prevent myself or be a little more cautious of what I'm eating is probably end up eating small portions of that. And I really like that ad which was run by FSSAI, I think a couple of years back, which says, Aaj se thoda kam. So the ad said that if you were having one laddu, just make sure that you have half a laddu. But you are still enjoying the meal or you're still enjoying the mithai, but probably not overindulging it. So I think that's the only way that over a period of time, you will have a better control of what you're eating and probably end up eating only what is required by you and not overindulging.
Also, a lot of people, what they'll do is that they'll skip a meal. They'll skip lunch, for example, because they have a big dinner coming up. What effect does that have on the body?
So we say that's completely wrong. On the contrary, if you know there is a party today and during Diwali, you do end up having a late nights or a evening dinners every day, please make sure you do not leave the house empty stomach. Do not miss out on your meal. In fact, what we suggest is probably have a light meal before you move out so that you are not so hungry and that you do not overindulge. So probably eating a light evening meal or having a light snack just before moving out, and preferably a healthier one, so that when you go there, it's more of enjoyment with your friends and chit-chatting with your friends rather than just focusing on food and probably, just meeting up with your hunger pangs.
The other thing we see during festivals are a lot of late nights. And because you have a late night, you're often sleep deprived the next day. How much does lack of sleep end up affecting what we eat?
Direct link, right? So we know for sure, the studies have shown that people who do not have or do have adequate sleep have a better control over their hunger hormone, which is ghrelin and leptin. So these are the two hormones which are directly related to how much we eat and also related to the number of fat cells we have. So directly linked to obesity. So people who are deprived of sleep or do not have a regular sleep or do not have 6 to 7 hours of a good sleep at night tend up to eating more, putting on weight more, and obviously leading to various health issues later on.
And now this is not particularly a festive issue, but whenever we have a busy schedule, we often forget to drink enough water. How much does that affect our system, especially during a time like this?
So in fact, water is now considered to be one of the most important nutrients. Earlier, we were just talking about the macronutrients and the micronutrients. where we talked about the proteins, fats, we talked about the vitamins, mineral, but never mentioned about fluid. But now we know that, body being adequately hydrated is very, very important. In fact, dehydration leads to a number of disease, simple things like a UTI infection to about as serious a problem like a gout or a kidney failure can happen if you're completely dehydrated for a very long time. So it is very, very important to keep yourself hydrated, and specifically during the festivities, because remember, when you are overindulging and when you take too much of salt, there is a tendency for the blood pressure to go up because, there's too much of sodium in the body. And one of the way which you can dilute it or probably get your blood pressure to normal is just by hydrating yourself well. Similarly, when you take a lot of alcohol, obviously it leads to a frequent urination, or even if you take too much of caffeine in form of your drinks, you actually urinate a lot. So therefore the body gets completely dehydrated. So therefore, during the festivities, again, you have to be very, very careful that you hydrate yourself and make sure that you're drinking adequate amount of liquid. And I think one of the reasons why you need to hydrate is just to look nice. I think that reason, and everybody will drink plenty of water.
Wait, can you elaborate more on that? In what way and how does it make us look nice?
So remember, whenever you're drinking pure, simple water, it hydrates your body, removes the toxins. So obviously, sitting in a city like Delhi where it's highly polluted, the body is always, there's so much of oxidative stress in our body, and be it from the food we are eating, be it from the pollution, be it from the stress we have, there's a lot of oxidative stress, or what we call the radicals, which actually cause a lot of inflammation in the body. One of the ways which you can remove this inflammation or remove this oxidative stress or radicals from the body is by hydrating yourself well. But remember, when I say hydrating, it has to be a low-calorie beverage, preferably water, and not those high-calorie or caffeine-enriched liquid beverages.
Also, the festival time is when, even if you have a regular exercise routine, that comes to a complete standstill. And it stays like that for maybe a week. How much does that matter if we don't exercise during this period? And what do you usually recommend to people in this regard?
No, I think on the other hand, it's the other way around, because they know they're going to overindulge and probably eat. So if they probably come to us, we always tell them, do not disrupt your discipline in terms of your exercise. So probably do your exercise in the morning, and probably then you can overindulge a little at night. So during the festivities, when you know there are festivals where you're going to eat more, or there will be a change in your diet pattern, at least make sure that in terms of your lifestyle, that is your exercise, you do not get that break and you are able to burn the calories. And it works on the same maths which we just discussed, that the way we say that, you go 500 calories plus and over a week, you probably put on 1 kilo. Similarly, if you burn 500 calories every day by a simple exercise, you'll probably reduce that 1 kilo in a week.
And what kind of exercise would you say makes you lose 500 calories?
So 1 hour when you walk, and that too when you walk for a brisk 1 hour walk, which is usually about 6,000 steps, you usually end up burning about 200, 250 calories. When you go to a gym for about 60 minutes, you end up doing about 450, 500 calories. You swim for about half an hour, a good swim, and you should be able to burn at least about 300 to 400 calories. So it's not that difficult. But yes, you'll have to do some amount of physical activity and make sure that you're doing that on a regular basis.
Is there any other practice you see during the holiday season that you find particularly concerning?
Okay, so one is, of course, the lifestyle. Obviously, so when we talk about the holistic care of a person, it not only includes your exercise and your food, but as we already discussed, sleep is a very, very important thing. Also, stress. In today's world, I think festivals have become more of a stressful event rather than enjoying it, because what I can see among people is like, I've just come back from somewhere and there was so much of a rush on the road. People are trying to go from one place to another to probably meet their friends or whatever, and there's so much of traffic. Remember, stress is the most important thing you really need to handle in today's day and life. And we know for sure that that is one thing which actually affects your health in a big way. So stress is something which you need to control. And the other thing when we've talked about diet is, of course, your gut. So remember, when you're indulging or overindulging, your body is actually need to digest all that food. And we have these poor little bacteria in our body, the good ones and the bad ones. And when you overindulge in the so-called the bad foods, the population of the good bacteria gradually goes down. And there is what we call the gut dysbiosis happening. And that's the reason post-festivity, it takes us almost about a month to get back to our normal healthy selves, because a lot of people have these issues with gut-related issues like, not proper digestion, indigestion, bloating, a lot of burping, etc. So those are very, very common things which we get to do that, see post festivities. And that's probably because of the wrong food you're eating, the stress which is there, not sleeping on time, not exercising. That all has a repercussion on your gut health also.
So to offset that, do you recommend people eating curd?
Probiotics, right. That really helps. So obviously, if you are eating too much of frieds and too much of oily foods and all, you obviously need to make sure that you have the balance back into your stomach of the bacteria. So yes, the probiotics work very well. So curd is one thing which is freely available at home. So even being winters and all, please do take a lot of curd. It will help you in better digestion and obviously get back your good bacteria back into the system.
You were listening to Three Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.